I didn't touch her first, her sadness did. It was the kind that lingered in the air before she even spoke, the kind you could almost hear in the way she exhaled. Quiet, measured, as if she was holding something she didn't want anyone to notice. I met her on an ordinary Tuesday evening, in a place that wasn't supposed to mean anything, a small community art class that smelled faintly of coffee and old varnish. I was there because I didn't know what to do with my weekends anymore. She was there because, as she put it later, it's easier to paint silence than live in it. Her name was Mira. Mid-40s, maybe? Confident in posture, graceful in motion, but her eyes carried a stillness that didn't belong to someone content. When she spoke, she always looked slightly to the side, as if conversation were a window she wasn't sure she wanted to look through. I noticed her hands before anything else, paint smudges near the nails, a silver ring she kept twisting when she thought no one was watching. When she reached across the table to pass me a brush, her sleeves slipped back slightly, revealing the soft curve of her wrist. It shouldn't have meant anything, but my breath caught anyway. She said, "You're holding it wrong," and smiled, not in amusement, but with a kind of gentle correction that made me straighten immediately. "Like this?" I asked. Her hand covered mine briefly. Guiding. Calm. Warm. Then gone. The air felt heavier afterward. She had that kind of presence that filled a room quietly, not demanding attention, but rearranging it. Even when she turned away, my eyes followed without permission. Her laugh was low, infrequent, but when it came, it sounded like something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. We sat side by side for almost 2 hours that night, barely talking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, like the room itself had learned to hold its breath. Every now and then, I'd glance at her canvas, muted colors, soft outlines, a woman walking into fog. I didn't ask if it was her. I didn't need to. When the class ended, I stayed behind to clean the brushes. She lingered too, carefully folding her scarf. Outside, the rain had started, tapping softly against the windows. "You live nearby?" she asked. "About 10 minutes' walk," I said. "Then you'll get wet." Her tone was light, but her eyes held me there, not quite concern, not quite indifference. Something else. I shrugged. "I don't mind the rain." She smiled faintly. "You will when it's cold." There was a pause. Long enough for something unspoken to form and then dissolve between us. She looked at me, then away. Her fingers brushed a droplet from the windowpane, tracing it downward until it disappeared. For a moment I thought she might say something more, invite me to wait, or offer a ride. But she didn't. She just gathered her things, turned slightly and said, "See you next week." Only she didn't move. Neither did I. The silence stretched again, filled with everything we weren't saying. My throat tightened with words that didn't know how to leave. Her perfume, faintly floral, warm, seemed to cling to the space between us. Then, suddenly, the door behind us creaked open. Someone from the next class stepped in, apologizing for being early. Mira blinked, as if waking from somewhere else. "Next week," she repeated softly, and this time, she left. The door closed behind her. And in the echo of her footsteps, I realized I hadn't even touched her. But something in her had already touched me first. The next week, she almost didn't come. Class had already started, the low buzz of chatter and brushstrokes filling the small room, when the door opened and she stepped in, hair damp from rain, coat clutched to her chest. The kind of entrance that draws eyes without asking for them. "Traffic," she murmured to no one in particular, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But when she caught my gaze, she smiled, small, tired, real. I pretended to look away too late. She sat beside me again, as if it had already become a quiet habit. The instructor spoke about composition, but my focus drifted, to the faint scent of her shampoo, to the way her shoulder brushed mine when she leaned forward. It wasn't deliberate. It didn't have to be. "You paint with hesitation," she said suddenly. I looked down at the canvas, a mess of half-formed shapes, color bleeding into color. Maybe I just don't know what I'm painting yet. She tilted her head, studying me the way one studies light before capturing it. Young men always think they're supposed to know. There was no condescension in her voice, only something softer, experience, maybe, or regret. You sound like you've met a few, I said, half teasing. She smiled faintly. Enough to know they never listen when they should. Her tone lingered longer than it should have. During break, we found ourselves alone by the window, the rest of the class outside, smoking or laughing. The rain had stopped but left the air cool and sharp. She stood close, arms folded, staring at the glass. My ex-husband used to say rain makes everything look honest, she said quietly. No pretense. Just what it is. I hesitated before asking. Was he right? Her lips curved, not quite a smile. He was wrong about most things. She turned then, and for the first time, looked at me as if she saw something unexpected, or dangerous. Maybe both. I wanted to say something light, but my chest tightened. I could feel the heat from her body, could hear the faint hitch in her breathing. The room felt too small, too aware. I took a step back, pretending to adjust my brush. You ever miss him? She shook her head. I miss who I thought I was with him. That silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was intimate. The kind that doesn't need filling. Later, as we packed up, she reached for a jar at the same time I did. Our hands brushed, barely, but neither of us pulled away immediately. Her fingers were cool, pain-stained, trembling just slightly. Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine. There was something in them, warning, invitation, confusion, all at once. She whispered, You should be careful, you know. Of what? Of being kind to lonely people. Then she let go of the jar and stepped back. But before leaving, she did something she hadn't done before. She touched my shoulder, briefly, almost like an afterthought. Good night, she said softly. It wasn't a big moment. But it was enough. Because even after she walked out, her touch stayed, right there, where her hand had been, like wet paint that refused to dry. The third week, something had changed. We didn't say it, but it was there, in how we moved around each other, how our words began to sound like unfinished sentences. Mira arrived early this time, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the light shift across the floor. I joined her quietly, trying not to break whatever stillness she was wrapped in. You're here before everyone, I said. She turned, that half-smile tugging at her lips. Maybe I wanted a quiet start. Her tone was casual, but her eyes stayed on me longer than they should have. During class, the instructor asked us to pair up for a composition study, 2 figures, 1 frame. I felt her pause before she said it. We could work together. It sounded innocent enough. It wasn't. We sat facing each other, sketching. I could feel her gaze tracing me as much as her pencil did. Every breath felt noticeable, every sound amplified, the scratch of graphite, the creak of the wooden stool, the soft rustle of her sleeve brushing mine. Hold still, she murmured. I am, I whispered back. Not inside, she said, almost under her breath. My pulse stuttered. I didn't answer. When the class ended, everyone drifted out, and we stayed behind again, pretending to finish up. She leaned over to look at my sketch, her shoulder grazing mine. You made me look younger, she said. I smiled. Maybe that's how I see you. Her eyes flickered up, startled, almost pained. Don't. Before I could respond, the classroom door opened suddenly. Hey, Mira, oh! It was one of the regulars, a woman from the next session. She glanced between us, taking in the closeness, the charged quiet. Mira stepped back quickly. Just packing up, she said lightly. He's helping. The woman smiled, polite, knowing. Of course. Sorry for interrupting. She lingered a moment too long before leaving. The silence that followed was suffocating. Myra's hand trembled slightly as she gathered her brushes. She thinks. I started. Let her. She cut in, her voice tight. It doesn't matter. But it did. I could see it in the way she avoided looking at me. Outside, the hallway lights flickered. She stopped near the door, her hand on the frame. This, whatever it is, it can't look like something it's not, she said quietly. People talk. I took a step closer. What if it is something? Her breath caught. Then we stopped now. But she didn't move away. I reached out, not touching, just close enough that my fingers hovered above her arm. The space between us throbbed with something electric, fragile and reckless. She looked up at me then, eyes wet with something she wouldn't name. The world felt suspended, 1 inch, one heartbeat from something irreversible. Then her phone buzzed. The sound was sharp, breaking the moment. She flinched, stepping back, fumbling for it. A message. A name I didn't recognize. She silenced it quickly, her hands shaking. I should go, she said. I nodded, but neither of us moved. When she finally did, her fingers brushed mine again, deliberately this time, just for a second. Next week, she whispered. But her voice trembled like she didn't believe there'd be one. The next week, she didn't come. Her empty chair felt louder than any conversation in the room. I kept glancing at the door like some fool waiting for a miracle that had already decided not to happen. By the time class ended, I was ready to leave too, until I saw her through the rain-blurred window, standing across the street, coat soaked through, no umbrella. I don't remember crossing the road, just the sound of tires hissing on wet pavement, and my name almost lost in the rain. Mira. She turned slowly, eyes red-rimmed, makeup smudged faintly. You shouldn't be here. You didn't come. I couldn't. Because of me? She didn't answer, which said everything. We stood beneath the awning of the small cafe next door, the rain pounding around us. The scent of coffee and wet earth hung between us, thick as the silence. Finally she spoke. I told myself it was just friendship. That I liked how you listened. How you looked at me like I was still someone worth noticing. Her voice cracked softly. But it's not that, is it? I took a slow step forward. No. The word came out rougher than I meant it to. She swallowed, eyes darting between my face and the ground. You don't understand. Don't say it. Too young. I'm not a child, Mira. Her breath came out shaky, visible in the cool air. People will think. I don't care what they think. You should. But even as she said it, she didn't step back. Her hand brushed against mine, trembling, testing the distance between what we wanted and what we feared. I reached up without thinking, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. She froze, didn't stop me, and in that tiny stillness, something fragile broke open. Her skin was cold beneath my fingertips. She exhaled shakily, eyes fluttering closed for just a second, as if that single touch had undone her resolve. Mira, don't, she whispered, but her voice betrayed her, soft, pleading, uncertain. The world seemed to shrink until there was nothing left but her breath near my mouth, her pulse visible in her throat, her hand gripping the edge of my sleeve like she needed an anchor. You'll regret this, she whispered again. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. Our foreheads brushed, not a kiss, not yet, but enough to make everything spin. I could feel her shaking, her lips parting just slightly, as if every reason to resist was dissolving right there between us. Then a voice. Mira? We broke apart instantly. A man stood at the edge of the cafe doorway, holding a takeaway bag, confusion flickering in his eyes. She stepped back, voice barely steady. Hi, I was just... He looked at me, then at her. Something unspoken passed. I felt my jaw tighten. She didn't look at me again. When he walked her to the car, she turned once, just once, and in that glance was everything we couldn't say aloud. I didn't see her for nearly a week after that night outside the cafe. The class felt hollow, all muted voices and empty chairs. Every brushstroke looked wrong without her beside me. Then, on the 6th evening, she appeared. Not through the door, but behind me. I didn't lie, she said softly. Her voice startled me enough that the brush slipped from my hand, smearing a streak of color across the canvas. I turned. She looked different, tired, guarded, but determined. The kind of determination that comes only after losing sleep to guilt. I didn't lie, she repeated. But I didn't tell you everything either. The room felt suddenly smaller. About what? She glanced around, at the few students still packing up, and nodded toward the back room. Please! We stood in the narrow supply space, the faint scent of turpentine and wood dust thick in the air. She closed the door halfway, just enough to make it feel secret. I thought it was over, she began quietly. My marriage. We live separate lives, but he still checks in. Still calls me wife when people are listening. I felt something cold slide down my chest. The man at the cafe. She nodded once. He still thinks we're trying. I didn't know what to say. The silence felt like pressure against my ribs. She continued, her voice trembling. I told myself what happened between us was harmless. That I just liked how you made me feel young again. But the truth is... She stopped, staring down at her hands. I started needing you. That word, needing, cracked something open in both of us. I took a slow step toward her. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do, she said quickly, eyes glistening. Because it's not fair to you. You don't know what it's like to be seen again after years of being invisible. You don't know what it's like to want something you're not allowed to want. Her voice broke on the last word. I reached out, not to touch, just to still her trembling. But she misread it, or maybe she didn't, because suddenly we were close again, close enough to feel each other's breath. She whispered, You make me feel like I'm standing on a cliff. Then don't look down, I said quietly. Her laugh was barely a breath, pained, disbelieving. You're too young to be this cruel. Cruel? For giving me back something I thought was gone. Her hand brushed mine, not a full touch, just a graze, but it sent heat racing up my arm. I could see her pulse in her neck, fast and uneven. The door creaked. Voices echoed faintly from the main room. We both froze. She stepped back, swallowing hard. He's coming to class next week, she said finally. He wants to see what I've been working on. The words landed like stones. I stared at her. So what are you saying? I'm saying, she whispered, that if we don't stop now, we won't be able to. And then, before I could speak, she slipped past me, her shoulder brushing mine in that deliberate, lingering way that made the warning feel more like a promise. The night her husband came to class, everything inside me coiled tight. He was polite. Charming, even. The kind of man who smiled too much when he was nervous. He stood behind Myra's easel, one hand resting on her shoulder like a claim. She didn't flinch, but she didn't lean in either. When he asked who had been teaching her shading technique, she hesitated a fraction too long before saying, The instructor. Our eyes met over the paint jars, a fleeting, electric glance, and I saw it then, guilt, fear, and something that still burned for me beneath it all. After class, she left quickly. He followed, holding the door for her, his hand brushing her back. I told myself to walk away. But I didn't. The rain had started again by the time I found her, outside, under the same awning as before, coat pulled tight, eyes fixed on the street. He's gone, she said without turning. He thinks I'm staying late to clean up. I stood beside her, watching droplets hit the pavement. You shouldn't have to lie. She smiled faintly. Neither should you. We stayed like that, shoulder to shoulder, the space between us pulsing with everything unsaid. Finally, she whispered, You make me feel alive again. The words came out raw, a confession dragged from somewhere deep. I turned toward her. Then why do you keep running from it? Because I'm not supposed to feel this way. Her voice trembled. You're supposed to meet someone your age, someone who hasn't already lived a whole life before you. I don't want someone else, I said. She looked up at me then, rain clinging to her lashes, lips parted, breath shallow. Mira, I said softly, you're the only thing that feels real anymore. Her eyes filled, and for the first time, she didn't look away. I lifted my hand to her face, slow, hesitant. My fingers brushed a raindrop from her cheek. She didn't stop me this time. Instead, she leaned into the touch, just slightly, a movement so fragile it almost broke me. "You know this can't last," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But that doesn't mean it's not real." For a heartbeat, either of us moved. The world outside disappeared, the rain, the noise, everything. Just the sound of her breathing and my pulse hammering in my throat. Then she reached up, her hand covering mine, holding it against her cheek. Her skin was warm now, alive beneath the cold. "If we do this," she said, voice trembling, "it changes everything." I nodded. "It already has." Her breath caught, and for a moment, it felt inevitable. The distance between us vanished. Her lips were a whisper away from mine, her hand still pressed against mine, anchoring it there. Then, she exhaled, stepped back, and let go. Her eyes softened, not in rejection, but in knowing. "This isn't about what we want," she said quietly. "It's about what we can live with." And in that moment, I understood, she wasn't choosing against me. She was choosing to survive herself. We stood there, soaked, silent, everything between us trembling like the last note of a song that had already ended. The art class had ended. The smell of paint and turpentine had been replaced by dust and quiet, and I'd convinced myself she wouldn't come back. Maybe she had chosen the sensible path, the safe one. Then one evening, as I was locking up the studio, I saw her through the glass door. Standing there, in that same gray coat, hands tucked into her pockets like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Mira. Her name felt different now, softer, steadier. She smiled, hesitant. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't." She paused. "But I didn't want to leave it the way we did." The air between us was cool but gentle this time, like the storm had finally passed. She stepped closer, slow, careful. Her hair had grown a little longer, her eyes were tired but lighter. "I thought walking away would make it easier," she said. "It didn't." I didn't speak. I just watched her, the curve of her hand against the side of her coat, the way her chest rose with every careful breath. She took another step closer, close enough now that I could see the small paint stain still clinging to her wrist, the same one from the night we met. "You said once," she began quietly, "that I shouldn't look down." I smiled faintly. "You remembered." "How could I forget?" she said. Then, after a breath, "I'm tired of looking down." Something in me broke open, all the restraint, all the waiting. I reached for her hand this time, not hesitating. Her fingers slipped into mine, tentative at first, then certain. The warmth of her palm felt like forgiveness. We stood there for a long while, no words, no excuses. Just the rhythm of two people who had run out of ways to pretend they didn't care. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. "What happens now?" She smiled, a real one, soft and full of something like peace. "We stop hiding from what already found us." I laughed under my breath. "That sounds dangerous." "Maybe," she whispered. "But I'm not afraid anymore." She reached up, brushed a lock of hair from my forehead, and rested her palm there. The gesture was simple, no rush, no urgency, just a quiet claim. Then she leaned in and pressed her forehead to mine. Not a kiss, not yet, but something more grounded. More true. The world outside could think what it wanted. For that one moment, everything made sense. When she finally pulled back, her eyes met mine, steady, unguarded. "Don't call it wrong," she said softly. "Just call it ours." I squeezed her hand once, and she smiled through the quiet, the kind of smile that makes you believe in second chances. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, catching the raindrops as they began to fall again, softly this time, like applause. And for the first time, we didn't move away.